trouble. And it comes out of the ninth of the commandments. We're almost to the end, folks. The ninth commandment is, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. You know, that can mean, I think, a lot of different things depending upon how you define false witness. So let me start by talking about why we would ever bear false witness against our neighbor. And please understand when I'm talking about our neighbor, I'm talking about anybody we encounter, not just the person that lives next door. There's a parable that Jesus told one time about a good Samaritan, and you remember the punchline is that everybody is our neighbor. So we're talking about why we would bear a false witness against anybody in all of God's creation. And let me suggest that there's three reasons why we might do that, why we might lie or tell an untruth about our neighbor. The first reason we might do it is to get something. You ever done that? You ever tried to get something by well, maybe not outright lying, but certainly by stretching the truth a little bit or not telling the whole truth? It's an amazing thing. You see, my grandson's in town. He's 8. Okay? And he wanted to get something when we went bowling yesterday. What he wanted to get was a snack. That's pretty normal for an 8-year-old, right? That's what he wanted to get. This is how he wanted to get it. He came up to, and he said, Grandpa, I'm hungry. And I knew that wasn't true because he'd left most of his lunch on the table an hour before. He couldn't possibly be hungry. But then the kicker was this. He said, Grandpa, I need a snack because I haven't had one for 3 days. He's been at Grandpa's house 24 hours. How many of you believe that lie? Right? I mean, it's kind of like, I really want something, and if I have to tell a little lie to get it, I will. Sometimes we bear false witness because we want to get things. Sometimes we bear false witness because we want to avoid things. I was really good at that as a kid with 4 brothers and a sister. If anything happened and the punishment was due to come my way, it was real easy to bear false witness against my big brother. He did it, I didn't. Right? I mean, that's bearing false witness. That is at least playing with the truth a little bit to avoid something that you really don't want. And of course, the third reason we sometimes bear false witness is to exalt ourselves in status next to somebody else. We try to make ourselves just a little bit better than somebody, sometimes by making ourselves better. Every once in a while you read in the paper about somebody whose military service record has been called into question because they're going around telling people, look how great I am because I did this and this and this in the military, and then you found out that they really didn't. Sometimes we exalt ourselves in status not by making ourselves look better, but by trying to make the other person look worse than they really are. I mean, those are 3 of the basic reasons why we would lie or stretch the truth or not tell the whole truth about people around us. We either want something, we want to avoid something, or we want to make ourselves look better and exalt ourselves over somebody else. Now, I'm one of those people, I don't think there are levels in terms of bearing false witness. Sometimes bearing false witness is the direct lie. I mean, we just flat lie about it. Maybe you don't, ever. But sometimes we just tell absolute lies to either get what we want, avoid what we don't want, or exalt ourselves over somebody else. We know it's not the truth, but we tell it anyway, hoping that people will not figure it out. Sometimes, and more often, I think, for most of us, bearing false witness is not about lying out and out directly. Most of us have been brought up to believe we don't do that. Sometimes we bear false witness not with the direct lie, but when but when we minimize the truth, either by making it less than it is or by only telling part of the story. My brother and I used to get in trouble all the time. I didn't ever tell a direct lie and say I didn't do it. I just said he did, which was partly true. He was usually involved in it. But see, sometimes it's a question of, well, not exactly lying. It's just not telling the whole story. And in so doing, you see, what we've done is we've borne false witness against those around us because we've tried to recreate reality for our benefit rather than for somebody else. So how do you know? I mean, at its worst. I think we can tell when we have borne false witness against others when the bottom line is that we've demonized them. And folks, we live in a culture that is so good at that, it is unbelievable. It's easy in a political year to talk about it. And you know what I figured out this morning? I figured out that we talk about it in a political year because if we focus on what those people are doing, we don't have to look at what we're doing in our own hearts. I really believe that. That in some ways we've made a whole group of people the whipping boys for what, and girls for what we frequently do. Which is to look at those around us and cast things absolutely in terms of black and white. Somebody's either all good or they're all bad. Somebody's motives are either really pure or they're really evil. And we seldom talk anymore about each other and the world around us in terms of what I call the grayness of relationship. You know, I don't know anybody that is totally evil. I really don't. I can name some people that come pretty close in my mind, but I don't know anybody that's totally, neither do I know anybody, including me, that's totally good. It just doesn't happen. But when we cast each other in that light, when we talk about somebody who never has a good motive, then what we are doing is bearing false witness against them. Because the amazing thing about God is that He's very clear in His Word that we all contain within us the love and the grace of God. And God is very clear in His Word that every one of us falls short of the glory of God. The 8th Psalm says every one of us was made a little less than God. And the Gospels are replete with relating the news that every one of us have sinned and stand in need of the saving grace of Jesus Christ. But you see, when we paint each other as all good or all bad, we are bearing false witness against each other, against the children of God. So what's that have to do with backache? What's that have to do with back problems? You know, bearing false witness is a terrible, terrible burden. And you know why. I mean, we all heard it growing up forever. My folks used to tell me, don't ever lie, because if you do, you have to remember from day to day what you said so that you can be consistent in your falsehoods. It's a terrible burden. Using the energy necessary to remember the things that were not quite the truth. As opposed to saying, you know, the truth is the truth, therefore we don't have to remember that. It doesn't take any energy to try to keep our stories consistent. Bearing false witness is a real burden because not only do we have to remember, but we have to be consistent in our remembering. It has to be the same story all the time. Not only that, but if our bearing false witness has to do with shaping reality, we have to make sure we're consistent in the shaping of reality. We can't be jumping back and forth between what's good and what's bad, depending upon what we want to avoid. Right? It's difficult, it's a burden to be able to spend all of the time and all of the energy that we need, that we use to bear false witness against each other. And finally, it's a terrible burden because of the results. I'm convinced that one of the things that's happening in the world today, and one of the things that the people of God need to very clearly stand up and say is wrong, is that we're raising whole generations of kids who believe that the truth is only the truth as long as you can get away with it. I'm believing that we have begun to couch everything in legal terms rather than moral terms. The issue in terms of what we say is no longer whether it's right or wrong, but is it legal? And that's unfortunate. Because there are some things that are legal, folks, that quite frankly aren't right. And the reason for that, of course, is that we make the laws. You and I, through the folks we elect. And we are fallible, broken human beings. And the burden that we will carry into the next generation and the next generation beyond that and the generation beyond that. Because we now live in a society that has forgotten what it means to bear false witness. And we now live even as a church sometimes who is not willing to stand up and say loudly and clearly, what is it, the oath you take in a court? The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And if we do anything else, either because of what we're going to get or because of what we're going to avoid or because it'll make us look better in the eyes of somebody, then we have borne false witness. And every time we do that as adults, we teach our kids and our grandkids that it's all right. We teach them that it's okay to play around with the truth, that the little white lie is okay, that less than the whole truth to serve our purposes may be okay. When what we ought to be doing is proclaiming every day the truth of the gospel. We are very, very good because God made us that way. And we are very, very bad because we chose to be that way. And the only thing that solves that, the only thing that addresses that issue, is a Savior hanging on a cross and walking out of an empty tomb. And if we go into the world with that hope and with that belief, you see, then we don't have to bear false witness against anybody. Because what we are blessed with and the problems we avoid and the way we look to the world around us is determined by a God who loves us, not by ourselves. Amen.